expend a lot of time, a lot of resources that the party just does not think it has at this point. So again, Hallie, not overwhelmingly surprising that he is endorsing Vice President Kamala Harris. And again, she has started the process of looking for a potential running mate, undoubtedly looking at a number of governors all across this country. But again, just a really stunning moment that the President of the United States has now officially announced he's not seeking re-election and is passing the torch, as those protesters yesterday outside of the White House had urged him to do, to pass the torch. He has now done that, Hallie.
One of the questions, of course, Kristen, is does this put Democrats in a better position against former President Trump, in a relatively equal position, as if it were President Biden on the ticket? When you look at some of the polling, there are some surveys, some numbers that suggest that the vice president polls slightly better than President Biden did against former President Trump. But there's some polling that suggests it's fairly even here. So there's a real question mark, of course, moving forward as to what this means politically for Democrats come November, Kristen.
There is a big question mark, but I think you hit the nail on the head. Look, she's competitive with him. And that's what I think President Biden wanted to see before he made that official decision to pass the torch, as it were, to his vice president. He wanted to see that she's competitive, and the polls suggest she is very competitive. And look, I've been talking to Democrats who say this is a moment in which she can be reintroduced to the country, not just on the campaign trail.
It's here, ladies and gentlemen. It has finally happened. After so long of denial that Biden had dementia, after so much denial that there was anything wrong with Biden, it has finally happened. Joe Biden has officially dropped out of the presidential race. Let me see. So yeah, this was his tweet. He doesn't actually... Yeah, he says it straight up in the note that he's dropping out. So there you go. It's finally happened. It's crazy. I had no clue if it would happen or not. I was totally like in the air. I was like roughly 50-50, but it happened. So oh my god. The glitch is happening where my screen disappears. My mouse disappears for some reason. There we go. No. Yeah, he endorsed Kamala Harris. I'm assuming Kamala Harris... I'm assuming Kamala Harris is going to be the winner. I mean, Bernie could run, but I don't know if he'll run, and even if he does, I don't know if he'd get it. I mean, who else other than Bernie could actually be a difference from Biden? I think Kamala Harris has better polls than Biden, so... gentlemen. It's Jover, baby. It's Jover. Is the NBC stream, is that loud enough? Can people hear that? I mean, it's huge, but it's probably just going to be Kamala, who I think is mostly very similar to Biden. I don't know if Harris is polling better than Biden. Is it also a question?
He will want to do that in full
I'm
voice,
stupid.
Feeling better,
There we go.
no longer positive for
Streaming is harder than it looks, especially when it's like
we're all in
I
this
just
moment,
these
and it
historic
is,
events
really
happen and I
extraordinary
just
to have
decide,
the
okay, I'll
president
start streaming.
Not seek re-election after he fought so hard to maintain his position at the top
Should
of the
be
ticket,
working now.
and many next steps that we will be exploring in the days to come before the Democratic convention. One source I talked to said if they were divided going into the convention, it would be a certain doom for the party. This allows some time to begin next steps and to try to get back on the issues that they believe are issues that can support a victory, even though there is turmoil on the ticket itself. So that's where we start off, Hallie, and I'll toss it back to you.
Kelly, thank you. Don't go too far, please. I want to report now from our colleague Mike Memley that a source familiar with the conversation tells us that President Biden did, in fact, speak with Vice President Kamala Harris today ahead of the announcement. I want to go to Yamiche Alcindor, who's been the tip of the spear in reporting on.
You guys didn't really miss anything anyways. Not much new has come out yet.
In a way, Yamiche, that left
just a bunch of liberal yapping.
President Biden may not take the move that he ultimately did today. Talk us through it.
That's right. Well, of course, this is huge news, but this is news that the vice president was preparing for. Now, of course, as your vice president, she is someone who had always been ready to take the job as president. But in the last few weeks, sources had told me that she was doing a really sort of distinct balancing act. She was both publicly and privately supporting President Biden.
Dude, Kamala Harris is so hyped right now. She is so freaking hyped and excited.
With the president endorsing her, of course, her team is going to be hoping that she becomes.
Oh, I wonder who's going to be the new vice president.
The vice president, who were laying out a path to victory possibly for her, because of course she's going to now be taking this step where she has to make up, they say, for lost ground here. So looking at what that might look like, they were talking already about making staff changes to the Biden campaign, possibly at the very, very top. They were also talking about sort of what a path to victory could look like for her, for President Biden. He was looking at Minnesota, at Wisconsin, Michigan. She might still be interested in those states, but sources close to her have told me that she's really interested also in looking at the South, African Americans in particular being a key part of the Democratic pace, and will be a key part of her because she's going to be, if she is selected at the top of the ticket, of course, this history-making candidate, being the first Black woman and the first South Asian American woman to be a major party ticket nominee.
I mean, who are even the candidates for vice president
were the places that she was going to be looking
to replace Kamala?
So really, what you see here is,
do you think they'd go with like a
step into this role that
progressive option?
Had been really preparing for behind the scenes.
Yamiche Alcindor, thank you so much.
I also want to
again. Go ahead, Yamiche.
Oh.
I also want to just point out that there were a lot of people that are really sort of talking about this open process and what that might look like. And from my understanding is that there are going to be a lot of women, especially Black women, who are leaders of the Democratic. So
my stream is apparently just the waiting room for Black Red Guard and fellow traveler, huh?
But also as an African American woman who is
I get it.
Of the White House.
I get it.
Speaks directly to the base of the Democratic Party, with Black women being the most loyal voters for Democrats.
Yeah.
From my understanding, they're going to really be pushing hard. So expect in the next few minutes, next few seconds, to hear a lot of Black women in the Democratic Party talking about the fact that she has to be the nominee. Ali.
Yamiche Alcindor, thank you very much. Again, significant news breaking today. President Biden withdrawing from the 2024 race, stepping off of the ticket, and endorsing his vice president, Kamala Harris, the start of a new moment in this presidential race. That does it for our NBC News special report. We'll see it tonight on Nightly and on NBC News Now.
In a second, but first, I'm curious what you think of a full female ticket, of a Harris Whitmer ticket. Just go big on the Democratic side and push back specifically at all that machismo energy that we got out of the RNC. Hulk Hogan on the stage, Donald Trump yelling.
I'm going to put this poll out. I have no clue who would be vice president, but maybe it'd be one of these four people.
It certainly, it's a great possibility, and I will tell you, one of those women will win you. Michigan automatically. I mean, you look at most polls, and Gretchen Whitmer does exceptionally well. And so,
what about
I think they have to look
what's
at
his name?
again,
The California
is
governor.
for Democrats to disrupt, to be different, and to break the rules and break the traditional rules, and that would be one great way to do it. So, anyway, thank you so much for having me. I'm about to. I think I have to run to my gate.
You're going to excuse yourself. Joe Scarborough, I appreciate it. Thank you so much. We look forward to hearing you and the whole team bright and early tomorrow morning. Joe, thanks so much.
You guys think it'll be AOC? They'll try to get like a progressive person?
Politicosphere and from Democratic lawmakers, Democratic governors. Joining me now, NBC News Congressional correspondent Julie Sirkin. We've also gotten a statement from
I genuinely think
Majority Leader in the Senate
Kamala Harris
saying that
might
Joe
be
Biden
worse than
has not only
Biden
been a
in
great
some
president
ways.
and a great legislative
I don't know
leader,
anything about her. I think she's done such a good job, like,
decision, of course,
just
is
like
not
being a
easy,
nothing
but he once
person.
again
I have
puts
no
country's
clue,
economy
but
and our future
just
first. Joe,
she seems like
today
the
shows
epitome
you are
of just like a
extremely
status
fair
quo
and a
kind of
great
person.
American. That's from the Majority Leader, Chuck Schumer. Julie, I know it's been a little bit quiet on Capitol Hill because lawmakers have been in their home districts on recess, but it certainly hasn't been quiet in conversations among lawmakers who are normally on Capitol Hill. What can you tell us about the moments leading up to this decision and what you've heard so far?
No, definitely not, Katie. And I think because lawmakers were not here, they weren't able to get organized or have as much conversations together as they normally would.
Do not come.
That they're on the same page. We saw that play out.
Do not come.
The last couple of weeks with Democrats really.
I'm gonna come.
We saw the 38th Democrat, the 37th and 38th, Senator Joe Manchin.
We must come together.
Of course, Dean Phillips, who challenged Biden unsuccessfully earlier this year, come out and call on him to pass the torch. But other than that, you know, when you talk about the leadership statements coming in now, that statement from Schumer, I think is so notable because behind the scenes, it was Schumer,
Joe Biden's
Speaker Emerita Pelosi, Hakeem Jeffries, the Democratic leader in the House, James.
Here's the meme I'm referring to.
Joe Biden said, come.
Do not come. Do not come.
I'm going to come.
We must come together.
Clyburn codable, right? Because tomorrow and Tuesday, the senators and the House members are going to be back on Capitol Hill. We had heard, according to our sources, myself, my colleague Ali Vitale, and other members of our team, that Democrats up here were privately urging the president and his team to make this decision to bow out of the race before they were forced to essentially.
I'm gonna come.
Publicly when they're in these halls, when we're chasing them after they spent so much time home talking to constituents, talking to voters who several of them already said have changed their minds, urge them to call on the president to step aside. So this is a really major moment. And I want to talk also about something that Joe had referenced here in terms of Republicans, because what we're seeing in the minutes after Biden put out this statement from NRCC chair, the House campaign arm chair Richard Hudson, for example, saying that perhaps this will be challenged in certain states, the House Speaker saying that as well. So just a monumental moment here that we are facing, obviously, and we'll stay on top of it, Katie, as we get more.
Julie Sirkin, thank you very much. Let's bring in NBC's Mike Memley. Mike, before I go to you, I want to read a little bit from a phone call that our own Garrett Haake had with former President Donald Trump. He told Garrett, Joe Biden is the worst president in the history of the United States by far. There has never been a president who has done such damage to our country, from energy independence to letting in millions.
Dude, American politics has been insane the past month. I mean, it's been like one of the most insane months of politics like ever. I don't even follow too much close. I've never been a huge close follower of American politics, but things have gotten spicy now.
Stayed in his basement. This comes comes on top of quite a bit of reporting. You heard of Joe Scarborough a moment ago talking about the fear that the Trump world might have on a disrupted ticket, but also Tim Alberta's reporting that the Trump campaign had one opponent in mind, had strategized against one opponent, had one campaign against one opponent, and that opponent was Joe Biden. They weren't preparing for anybody else, and now they've got someone else. Mike, tell me about what happened at the White House today, any conversations between the president and the vice president.
I'm told from a source familiar with the matter, Katie, that the president did speak with Vice President Harris today ahead of his announcement of his decision to step aside to no longer seek a second term as president of the United States. This came within moments of what we saw, obviously, unfurling the letter first from the president, making that decision public, and then second, a tweet announcing that he was indeed supporting the vice president for this seat now. And this is really a remarkable development at a time when President Biden's every impulse over the last 3+ weeks since that debate in Atlanta has been to fight. He had strived to this.
Yeah, he did not want to drop out at all. Like, I wonder if he's like super pissed right now. I bet he's so fucking angry. He is probably really angry. I mean, he probably half the time doesn't even know what's going on, but like, when that little brain cell remembers that he lost his second term, he gets angry.
Of course, the past few years, once you're in this office, you don't just walk away. And the president, as he's made clear over the last few weeks, felt he still had more to give. He wanted to finish the job. He felt so proud of his record of accomplishment over the course of these 3.5 years and felt he was still capable of continuing to do that job. But Katie, as he's made this decision now, I think very much of what he told the nation often after he announced in 2015 that he would not seek the presidency in 2016. He said that no man or woman should seek the office of president of the United States unless you're able to commit 100% of yourself to that effort. The president, since that debate, has certainly been fighting his way to make the case to Democrats that he could still win this election, that he could still do the job. But the task of fighting against his own party, against the will of the voters who
fighting his collapsing brain, more like.
To serve, and ultimately the question of whether Donald Trump would replace him if he stayed in this race proved to be too much for this president to take on. And so now we're seeing a very dramatic shift in the conversation that Democrats have been having over the last few weeks, especially in the last week. It has become very personal, very bitter in some ways between President Biden and some of those Democratic leaders who he has some of the strongest relationships with, no less than former President Barack Obama, with whom he served for 8 years. And as we saw some of the harshest statements,
they should make me president.
Those who were trying to push him aside were really meaning. I think it spoke to what was maybe the last throes of this decision that he knew was.
I'd clean things up.
That he might have to make, but fighting to the end here. I've been saying for the last 3 weeks, Katie, that he's 100% in until he's 100% out. And we're told that this was a very close hold decision that was made. I've been here in Rehoboth Beach for the last 48 hours. Some of his most senior and closest advisors have been here with him, have been having conversations with him during the day yesterday.
United shit stains. I like that.
A very small piece of real estate here in Rehoboth, but wasn't able to contact them most of the day yesterday. And I think it spoke to the fact that
not go Biden, no.
Even some members of his own campaign team, even just below the ranks of the senior leadership, were learning of this decision from that tweet, just as so many of us were.
It's not fair. Oh crap!
Excruciating decision for President Biden. He worked his whole life to get to where he is today.
He killed innocent children his whole life to get where he is today.
Especially when you have.
He drank the blood of so many children to get to where he is today.
I'm sure is what pushed
it's a tragedy.
Mike Memley, thank you very much. Joining me now, presidential historian Michael Beschloss. Michael, John Meacham, sorry, I had the wrong lead-in. John Meacham, thank you very much for joining us. You're on the phone for us. When did you last speak with President Biden?
I don't want to talk about conversations with the president. I'd like to point out that this is a singular moment.
I don't know why I'm watching NBC. NBC is absolutely useless.
For a man who, as Mike was just saying, has given the lion's share of his life to the service of the Republic. It is almost without precedent in the American experiment for a president to make a decision like this. I think it tells us an enormous amount about the character of the incumbent. It tells us a lot about what he truly values. President Biden has decided that this campaign is not about him, but about us. It's not about personal ambition. It's about the durability and viability of the constitutional order that so many of us believe could be in danger as events unfold. And I think before we race ahead, as we will inevitably do in about 5 seconds, because that's what we do in America, I think the country should take a moment and realize the magnitude of the decision that President Biden made for the good of his country. And certainly it's a respected reality here. He likes to say he's a great respecter of fate. And history and fate.
Dude, it is so depressing that we didn't have even a third party remotely equipped to take advantage of all this, you know? Like, Jill Stein is kind of weird. Cornel West is kind of weird, but he's alright, but he, like, has been just, like, completely unprepared and unorganized the entire time. He has just been, like, an absolutely, like, just totally not prepared and switching a party every, like, 3 months, and yeah. I mean, it wouldn't matter anyways, but at least to, like, you know, raise the profile of third parties.
Absolutely. This is the first time in 56 years, since 1968, that a major
since Lyndon Baines Johnson, right?
Candidate that didn't enter any primaries. Most of us, well, I certainly haven't been through a situation like this. I'm 40 years old, so I missed it by 16 years. It's going to be one of those moments that, in entire chapters, entire books.
That is true.
American history will be written about how
one party is the only true solution. I agree. How many proletarian classes are there? One. So you only need one party.
Precipitous decline. We were coming through an era where...
Yeah, if I vote at all, I'll probably vote for a third party. Even if they're not. There's no one I'm crazy about.
Which is not always commensurate to our problem.
Is this another Green Party that is anti-nuclear energy? Because I don't fucking get that at all. That's just so insane. Like, it's just so pathetic.
As a means of resolving problems as opposed to going to total cultural war every single day. That consensus was facing an existential crisis. And President Biden, who beginning in his 20s, entered the public arena, a border state politician, right? Delaware's a complicated, small state, but complicated. A Roman Catholic part of the 20th century world.
How the fuck is Delaware a complicated state? It's like 500,000 white people. It's like the least complicated American state.
And learned the world as a foreign policy guy. And then history and fate brought him to the vice presidency for one of the most historically interesting figures in American history, President Obama. And then it brings him at a point when we thought his political story was over. It was not. And rather like Cincinnatus, right, the ancient figure who was called to service, he ran in 2020. And in many ways, and let's also remember
this is so boring. Okay, hold on. Maybe ABC is slightly more interesting.
be seriously considered by Kamala Harris, as she makes, in very short order, will need to make a decision about her running mate.
Yeah, and John, let's just talk about the timing here, because this is not a decision that she's going to have weeks or months potentially to make. She's going to have to make this decision fairly quickly, because we are so close to the election and so close to the convention.
Yeah, and the convention is in the middle of August. The Democrats have established a virtual roll call. Now, they can always change this, but they were to formalize their nominees on August 1st. But remember, Rachel, you
I hope it's an actual debate and Kamala Harris isn't just completely like sworn in instantly on the first day. I hope there's like a day or two of like an actual discussion and like almost like a mini election where other people can at least like try, but that probably won't happen. But I don't know. We'll see.
Used, if there's anything in a potential running mate's background that could come out over the course of the campaign, that could be detrimental. So there's very little time to do vetting here, and there's very little time to decide anyway. But to do the decision plus the vetting, Kamala Harris has to be thinking about this right now. And my hunch is, even though she didn't get that call from President Biden until just a short while ago that he was opting out of the race, my hunch is she's already been thinking about this.
John Carl, thank you. I want to go back to our ABC's Martha Raddatz. Martha, you have known President Biden for a very long time. You did that debate with him back in 2012. There's been so many Democrats that have come out and said that he is not essentially the same person. We even heard from Congressman Seth Moulton, who said that President Biden didn't even recognize him when he saw him just a few weeks ago. And so much of the conversation will be on that point. Is this the same Joe Biden that was here a year ago, 2 years ago?
I would have to say no. I mean, based on what we have seen and seeing him on the campaign trail in 2012 during that debate with Paul Ryan, when it was vice presidential debate, obviously, he was sharp and funny and knew the issues inside and out and really dominated the debate. Over the years, things have really, really changed. And in this last year, you can see it. Everyone has. Joe Biden says, "Look at me, I will prove this." But he really isn't the same person. Now, everybody ages differently.
I could go on a long rant about how stupid the anti-nuclear people are. Nuclear reaction meltdowns are so rare and so unlikely. And even if another nuclear reaction meltdown happened, the damages of climate change are so much more total and so much more drastic than even a severe nuclear reaction. What happened in Chernobyl and like the exclusion zone, that's bad. I won't pretend that's not bad. But the effects of climate change are even more disastrous and even more long-lasting and completely world-destroying forever. So you need to take a risk. You need to take a little bit of a risk. You need to not... I could just go on forever. Yeah, it's very misguided. This fear of like a meltdown, because the consequences of climate change are not a die roll. They will happen, period. They will kill billions of people. Billions. I believe that. I think climate change is going to kill billions. I think that's locked in. I don't think that's like potential. I think at this point, we have so totally failed to even begin to transition that the deaths of billions are written in stone. It will happen. But now it's a matter of how many billions. How many billions are going to die? How many billions will lose their lives? That is what we're looking at now. And when you do this bullshit about worrying about about nuclear reactors and stuff. It's like, it's just silly. It's just silly when we need to do anything and everything we can. Yeah. Anyways.
For weeks now. Mary, these are extremely fast-moving developments. The president now saying that he's going to step aside. He's officially endorsing Vice President Kamala Harris. We're learning that the DNC expected to hold a call later this afternoon. This has to move extremely quickly. And we're also learning that even some of the president's aides and advisors were caught off guard by this announcement.
Yeah, Rachel, just a couple hours ago, some of the president's closest allies were out on the Sunday morning talk show saying that he was all in, that he wasn't going anywhere. They were digging in. That was the message coming out of the campaign over the weekend. You know, we were told the president was looking forward to getting back out on the campaign trail later this week. So this was very much a surprise. The timing of it, especially since the president, he is right now recovering from COVID. He's at home in his Delaware beach house. So we thought that this would be something that if he did make, certainly would be, a couple days down the road once he was recovered. The president has said, of course, that he will be speaking about this once he is well enough to. And now all eyes are really on Kamala Harris. We still have not heard any reaction from her. She is not out on the trail today. She is here in Washington. She hasn't even announced her candidacy yet. And everyone is turning to her to see, where this goes next. To imagine in just a matter of within an hour, she went from learning of this to now everyone talking about her, discussions about who will be her running mate. It is enough to make your head spin, to say the very least. I'm sure this is something
I wonder
that
how
Kamala
long
Harris has
Kamala
thought
is
about,
actually known.
especially as we have seen these conversations over the last several weeks and that growing chorus, growing louder and louder of Democrats calling for the president to step aside. But this is going to move real fast. If you think it's head spinning already, we are, just weeks away from the Democratic convention. The election is right around the corner. We just saw over the last week Republicans really uniting behind Donald Trump. So this is going to be really an amazing historic sprint here to the finish. And there are just
Bro, even Jeb Bush endorsed Trump. Even the man who has never been more cucked by any man endorsed the man who cucked him so hard. Like, that's when you know that the Republicans are united around Trump. When Jeb Bush is like, yeah, vote for Trump. I was making a best of Trump compilation, and people do not know how much Trump was like on fire in the 2016 presidential debates, the famous presidential debates when there was more candidates than ever before or since. There was like 20 Republican candidates, and Trump just completely destroyed all of them. He went so hard on Jeb Bush, like, it's crazy. And Ted Cruz too.
Sort of peel back what she has been focused on during this administration. You mentioned she's been the leading voice on the issue of abortion rights, but also on handling the migrant crisis as well, Mary.
Yeah, and we saw that last week, right? Republicans really, in many ways, trying to argue that a vote for Joe Biden was a vote for Kamala Harris and putting her front and center in the debate over immigration. So let's be clear here. Kamala Harris was tasked by President Biden to tackle the root causes of immigration. She was never put in charge of border security, despite the argument that you may hear from Republicans, and I suspect you're going to continue to hear from Republicans. They see that as a real political opportunity for them to try and take some hits at Kamala Harris. But she certainly has been very involved in the issue of immigration and the root causes of that. Abortion, though, is the issue that she has owned and dominated over the last year. In fact, I spent a whole day out on the trail with her several months ago where she was out just hammering this point. She has argued that Donald Trump is to blame for Roe versus Wade. They often cite how Donald Trump has bragged about appointing 3 of the Supreme Court justices who overturned that decision. And they have argued that all of these restrictions that we are seeing put in place across the country are Donald Trump's fault. That is an argument you are going to continue to hear Vice President Harris, perhaps nominee Harris, make in the future. But there are just a lot of questions here still to unpack before you can even imagine, how all of these changes will change the actual campaign's argument. The good thing is she has been out on the trail. Look, she has been out. She's been making the case. That case will not change. But there's certainly a lot of questions about what this ticket will look like in the coming days and weeks, Rachel.
Definitely, Mary. Thank you. I want to bring back in our political director and our Washington bureau chief, Rick Klein, because Mary does make a really good point here. We've heard from President Biden, but we have yet to hear from Vice President Kamala Harris, Rick.
Technically, she hasn't even announced that she is a candidate for president.
She's celebrating,
that is a glaring omission from the discourse at this very fluid moment, Rachel. Keep in mind that up until about an hour ago, everyone in the Democratic Party was making plans to have a convention in Chicago that would do what conventions always do, which is to nominate the person who won the most delegates. Joe Biden won almost all of the delegates.
Okay, did I just improve the resolution of my camera?
Delegates. In fact, the Democratic National
My
Committee
camera
was
is
doing
supposed
a
to
Zoom
look
call
nicer
to
than
iron
it
out the
does.
details of what would have been a virtual roll call to lock down the nomination for him as early as the first week of August. While that call was going on, they got the news of President Biden's statement. So at that time, just getting some new reporting on this, they actually said that they'd be adjusting their guidance and trying to provide as much flexibility as possible for the delegates. You can read that in one way and say, wow, open convention, it is going to be an absolute free-for-all in Chicago. However, the fact that President Biden has already endorsed Vice President Harris speaks very loudly. Again, these are all delegates that are loyal to Biden, at least on paper. As of now, no one else has come forward and said that they're willing to challenge her. We've asked many of the offices of the people that are rumored to be thinking about running for president, people like Governor Whitmer, people like Governor Pritzker, people like Governor Beshear, Secretary Buttigieg, and none of them have indicated in any way that they would challenge, but none of them either have endorsed Kamala Harris. So at this hour, there's actually no one technically running, although I'd expect something from the Harris team in the coming minutes or hours from now. Then the question is what it looks like, because the party wants to make this look like it's not just an automatic, that it's not just a coronation, because Kamala Harris technically wasn't running for anything during the primary process. Joe Biden was. Those delegates are Biden delegates and not Harris delegates. So they're going to want to create at least the impression of an open process, all while trying to make it as clean with little messiness as possible. It is quite a balancing act. And again, Rachel, unbelievably fluid at this hour.
Rick Klein, thank you. I want to bring in our ABC political contributor, Donna Brazil now. Donna, what is your reaction to this news? You have been talking to Democrats within the party as they have urged President Biden to step aside. What is your reaction to the president finally making this decision?
Of course, I'm saddened because I respect Joe Biden, and I was prepared, as I did in 2020, to support the Biden-Harris ticket. Joe Biden is an honorable man, as he's done throughout his entire career. He made a decision that is best for our country. So I know the Democratic Party will come together at the convention, and our ticket, which will be led by Kamala Harris, will win in November.
Donna, I want to ask you, because perhaps no one knows the rules better than you when it comes to the convention. How can this all play out? There are questions about whether or not this is going to be an open convention. How messy could this process be? What will it look like?
Well, I've always said my shorthand was Part A was...
What do I think Kamala's chances are? You know, probably better than Joe Biden, because Joe Biden his brain has just collapsed lately. So probably better than Biden at the least. Biden really said, I'm a head out. I mean, Kamala Harris has always just seemed to me like a complete empty vessel. Like just a complete empty slate. Who knows? I don't know what her chances are. I mean, probably better than Biden. That's the most I can say. Well, I mean, the public is biased against those. It depends on what part of the public it is. I mean, some parts of the public like all of those things. you know, Blue MAGA is a thing, K-Hive is a thing, you know. I just don't know.
Just before the president made this announcement, we heard from 40 Democrats calling on the president to step aside and drop out of this race. Do you believe that this is a party that would rally behind Vice President Kamala Harris, the vice president that the president himself has now endorsed in this race? And what is your message to those who may not think that she is the best fit?
Well, first of all, anybody who would like to step up today, tomorrow, maybe next week, I hope not too long, Kamala Harris is ready. I say that because she has been out there all throughout this year, campaigning from Michigan to Florida, just the other day to North Carolina. She was out on the West Coast. She's ready. She is ready. As I mentioned, she is battle-scarred, but she's also battle-tested. She knows the job, and she knows the pressures of a national campaign. You can't teach that. So she's going to make a case to the delegates. She's going to make the case to the American people, and she is going to ensure that the Democratic Party is ready to take on the party of Donald Trump. She can lean into the fight that we've been discussing, whether it's on making sure that America is safe and secure, to creating the kind of 21st century infrastructure that the president and Vice President Harris have been working on. This is a great opportunity for the American people to see how democracy works. The President of the United States said basically in his letter, I'm ready to pass the torch. I'm ready to see a new generation. And he did that. And I'm proud of Joe Biden for his courage and his tenacity.
Donna Brazile, thank you so much. I want to get back to our chief White House correspondent, Mary Bruce. You know, Mary, so much of the concern from Democrats up on Capitol Hill was not just about President Biden's chances of winning in November. There was also a lot of concern about the impact that the president would have staying in the race, also on the House and the Senate, their ability to hang on to majority in the Senate and also possibly win the majority in the House.
Yeah, and that, we think, was likely one of the driving arguments that may have pushed him to make this decision. We know that was an argument that was made in person by Democratic leaders Chuck Schumer, Hakeem Jeffries, the powerful former Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, coming armed with data and making that argument that if he stayed at the top of the ticket, he could be a drag on Democrats. I do think it's interesting when we talk, to pick up on what you were discussing there with Donna, the next generation, right? The president is passing the torch, but who is that next generation at reach?
It can't be AOC. That's a losing strategy. I mean, I don't know. Is it a losing strategy? Is she that bad, really? In terms of just purely from an election standpoint, is AOC all that bad as a vice president or president? But it seems like it's probably going to be Kamala Harris.
And guaranteed, it is very early in this discussion, is Kamala Harris, and whether they would then support the vice president if she were to run for the top of the ticket. Because, of course, there's been a lot of question about whether these other governors would be interested in jumping into the race or possibly would like to be a vice presidential pick were Kamala Harris to be at the top, Rachel.
Mary, good point that you're making here, that there's a lot of mention of President Biden and praising President Biden. Not a lot of mention right now of Vice President Kamala Harris. So let's take that to our chief Washington correspondent, John Karl. John, talk about some of the challenges that Vice President Kamala Harris faces.
Yeah, I mean, look, she is the absolute prohibitive frontrunner to replace Biden on top of the ticket. The fact that she's the vice president, the fact that Joe Biden has endorsed her, absolutely. But there are doubts within the Democratic Party about how strong a candidate Harris would be, general election candidate. So
yeah, I mean, like, people were trying to push her as like someone who's like really funny and has all these memeable moments, and she really doesn't. Like, from what I saw, like, she has that coconut tree thing, which is hilarious. I love that. But people were like, oh my god, I'm voting for her now. And they'd share some clip of her, and it's just like, you're trying so hard to push this person as some like funny, charismatic person when they're not really. They're not like an incredible gaffe creator like Joe Biden is. She's not like really charismatic like Barack Obama. She's not very memorable like Donald Trump. She's kind of just like there, you know. I don't know. That's my impression of her.
Very interesting dance to play out, but it is not a done deal. She's the prohibitive favorite in this, but it is not a done deal. And I think Mary raised a very important point, which is all of these statements from these big name Democrats who could potentially be on a ticket, none of them, at least to this moment, that I've seen or that Mary's seen, has mentioned Kamala Harris.
John, let me ask you, because I've been talking to Democratic sources as we've been on the air, and there's a little bit of a mix of relief from some of them that wanted to see President Biden step aside, but also some anxiety that I'm hearing from some Democrats over on Capitol Hill about what comes next. Exactly what you're talking about here. Is the party going to unify behind one person? Is this going to be a messy process? What have you been hearing from your sources in the party?
You know what's really funny about this? And what's really fucking pathetic about AOC is that I think like just yesterday, she like, or within a few days said something about supporting Trump, or not supporting Trump, supporting Biden staying in the race. Like, come on.
Control of the Senate and win back control of the House. Those are the factors that unite Democrats. They may be divided and deeply divided on the means, but there was also an overwhelming sense that Joe Biden was going to threaten all three of those goals if he had stayed in. So there's a sense of relief. And I think that
Lena, are you a liberal?
Energized Democratic Party as they come around. It may be messy for the next few weeks, but as they come around.
Does she know?
Yes.
Does she know?
As they come around the process of getting behind their nominee, you are going to see a rejuvenated Democratic Party, an energized Democratic Party. You're going to see the money flowing in a big way, the money that had dried up because there were such strong doubts about Joe Biden. So yes, it's going to be unconventional. This is going to be a heck of a story to cover, Rachel. I know you're going to be in the middle of it. But this is a Democratic Party that's going to come back in a major rejuvenated way to fight what right now looks like an uphill battle against Donald Trump.
John, thank you. And we were just talking about the lack of Vice President Kamala Harris's name being mentioned in some of these Democratic statements. So I want to go back to our chief White House correspondent, Mary Bruce. Mary, because we were just getting reaction and now from the Congressional Black Caucus, a group that has stood firmly behind President Biden. What are they saying now?
Well, based on this statement, they are now firmly going to be standing behind Vice President Kamala Harris. I'm just reading through this, so bear with me. But the Congressional Black Caucus chairman releasing the following statement, praising Joe Biden as the ultimate statesman, saying he's dedicated his entire career amid great personal sacrifice and service to the values of democracy, civility, freedom, and opportunity. He is undoubtedly one of the most accomplished presidents in American history. And he goes on to say the Congressional Black Caucus joins President Biden in fully supporting Kamala Harris as our party's nominee. She has been instrumental in delivering the accomplishments of the last 3.5 years and has led on lowering maternal mortality rates, protecting reproductive freedoms, and ensuring economic opportunities for all. Rachel, we have been discussing this. Kamala Harris has been out there on the trail, really reaching out and trying to up the campaign's outreach to those critical black voters whose support they will need if they want to win in November. Having the endorsement of the Congressional Black Caucus is a very big deal.
I think J.B. Pritzker could be the nominee
on the Hill to get in line.
Absolutely, Mary. We know it was black voters that propelled President Biden to the White House.
To try to get that, at least the somewhat progressive angle. Because, yeah.
People are now focused in on Vice President Kamala Harris, with President Biden giving this firm endorsement to his own vice president. Talk a little bit about her history, what she's been focused on, and her background.
Yeah, Rachel, I want to talk about actually the historic nature of this moment, the potential historic nature, I should say. I mean, you heard John Carl say it's not a done deal. Rick Klein said technically she's not the nominee, but it appears to be heading in that direction. She would be the first black female nominee, the first Indian American ever if she were to become the nominee. And I want to point out her book, right? I'm sure you have read her book. Page 1 starts 8 years ago with Hillary Clinton, the day that she was up against Donald Trump and the day she lost. I mean, we are going back potentially to that moment where she is taking that very spot.
Okay, yeah, whatever. Kamala right now. Is there any other funny memes? That's true. If you're on the fence about voting for Kamala Harris or the next Dem nominee, please consider how much it would ruin Hillary Clinton's life to be the only Democrat to lose to Donald Trump. That is the single most compelling argument I've heard to vote for Kamala Harris or Joe Biden. The memes are weak, man. The meme game is not on right now. That is so cringe. You say it's Jover, I say it's just... No, that's not funny. $7,500,000 people tweeting it's Jover right now.
I'm not gonna be here.
Now Trump. Gavin Newsom has people want. God no, Pete Buttigieg for vice president. Please no. Michelle Obama. Michelle Obama vice president. Dude, the memes of the assassination attempt were so funny. I didn't look at them on stream, but afterwards there were so many funny memes. I guess the event just happened, so people's meme game is not yet at its peak. Oh, in other news, I believe the ICJ ruled that the there was a big ruling the ICJ had. Where is it? Well, yeah, effectively the ICJ said that Israel is an apartheid state. So, yeah. Now, it doesn't have any official, it can't like officially make Israel stop doing anything, but it's still, you know, a propaganda victory, at least. Oh, I should stop because there's going to be like Gore is going to pop up on screen or something. Hassan for vice president. That's fucking amazing. Hassan, I was ready and you weren't, man. That is so funny. That is so funny. Bernie for vice president? That's not gonna happen.
The cannon, the cannon, the cannon. Trendsetter.
All right.
I like.
Kamala hitting send tweet on the Joe Biden. That's good. That's really good. Oh my god. That is fantastic. Yeah, man, she's gonna lose.
One of my elite employees. You have been promoted. You are now one of my elite employees.
God, this guy is fucking insufferable.
It's like promotion! That's the big question. What's he getting? That tastes like promotion!
She's just so not charismatic or interesting to me. People are going to be trying to push her so hard as, like, funny.
Well, think about this.
Anyways, yeah. Now Trump. I mean, it's ridiculous to, like, pretend that Trump and Biden have a similar level of cognitive decline. Like, Trump is not at his prime as he was, like, when 2016 or whatever, or even 2020, but he's nowhere near what Biden was. I mean, it's very silly to pretend that Trump has the level of dementia that Biden does. Trump just looks tired and, like, done. God, these liberals are so obnoxious. Just so insufferable. Pretending that Trump is, like, anywhere near as brain dead as Biden is. I mean, I don't know what you're talking about competence. This is not like, she's like a centrist. I mean, she's probably not gonna do much of anything. I'm just thinking of in terms of how electable she is. Potential Biden replacements. I mean, it's going to be Harris. But yeah. Michelle Obama 4%. That's funny. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what else to say.
Of state laws. Now, those state laws do have timing issues,
Obviously, getting on those state ballots is going to be crucial. So the Democrats, who have already prepared to do that by having this virtual roll call in early August, they prepared for that. But if Kamala Harris, Vice President Harris, is not essentially unanimously acclaimed as the nominee, if someone does step in or prepares to step in to challenge her, that might be a problem. Because if they have to go to their convention, which begins August 19th, they will miss the deadline for ballot access in at least Ohio. And so that could be a problem. But the basic challenge that you're hearing from Republicans, that it's too late for Biden to get out of the race because state ballot access is a problem. Election lawyers say, no, he's not the nominee. No one's the nominee until the convention says so.
Terry, a follow-up to you. How much does this have to do with the fact, I mean, I've heard from my sources within the Republican Party, even with the Trump campaign, that they wanted President Biden to stay on the ticket, that they wanted the former president to run against former President Donald Trump. How much does this have to do with the legality of all of this versus who they ultimately want to face off with in November?
Well, obviously, they looked at the polls. They liked what they saw in the polls, especially in recent days against President Biden. And yet, what they're really trying to do is just muck up as much as possible the works for Democrats as they go forward in this unprecedented situation. Look at the convention, right? The rules of the convention are pretty simple at this point. If President Biden releases his delegates, they don't have to support Kamala Harris. The only thing they have to do under Rule 13J, which you're going to hear a lot about probably, is vote their conscience. In good conscience, they must vote to support a candidate. So if there's anyone who wants to challenge Kamala Harris, there'll be these test votes on accepting those rules, and then, you know, you'd head to the floor. But as for the Republican efforts to sue their way to keep Harris off of state ballots, that's probably just an effort, you know, to make the Democrats look disorganized. There's also been talk of impeaching President Biden on the grounds that he is now incompetent to serve, incompetent to run. Again, almost certainly wouldn't happen, and yet would muck up the works. So expect to see the Republicans take as much advantage of the chaos here, even though they are concerned about the redefinition of this race. Look how fast politics moves. Kamala Harris now center stage, others perhaps circling, testing the waters, calling people up. Joe Biden, after 50 years in politics, in which he reached the highest level, is now yesterday's man. And take a moment to think of how this proud man is feeling at the end of this career.
Yeah, it's an extraordinary moment, no doubt about that. Terry Moran, please stay with us. Thank you. I want to bring in now the former governor of New Jersey, Chris Christie, who joins us now on the phone. Mr. Christie, this news just coming in. What is your response to some of these Republicans who are saying that they want to challenge this in court, some even calling for the president to step down immediately from office?
Well, look, I think the first thing is when you look at the legal challenges, I've looked at this across the country over a number of years. And what you find that courts will generally do is if they believe that voters would be left with no choice in a particular election, they always err on the side of giving the voters a choice and allowing the voters to make the decision. And I've seen that in statewide races, and this is essentially the decision, a decision by a court in any state about whether or not all the people of their state are going to have a choice for President of the United States. So while I will not be at all surprised to see the Republican infrastructure of the Trump campaign
is that Chris Christie talking?
File these lawsuits, I'm skeptical that any of them will have any success in precluding whoever the Democratic nominee is from the ballot. Remember, too, Rachel, that no one's been nominated yet by the Democrats. It's not like the nominee has withdrawn. He's not been nominated, and he wouldn't be officially nominated until the convention votes a majority of the delegates to him. So I think that's something that will help whoever winds up replacing Joe Biden in terms of any of these state challenges.
So my stream just got hit for ad suitability. I don't know how long it's been hit for ad suitability, but I don't know how this could possibly be demonetizable. What the fuck? Like, all I'm doing is streaming Biden. Oh my god. That's insane, dude. Well, I'm probably not going to make a cent off of this stream, so if anyone wants to support me, you can donate to me on Streamlabs, or you can do it through YouTube, or you can do it by subscribing to my Patreon, where you can get Patreon exclusive videos, Patreon exclusive essays, early access to videos I put out, all that good stuff. Because for some reason the stream is demonetized.
Here's the thing. We need to know who the candidate's going to be.
The deep state is after
and then
me,
we have
man.
to see how they're going to perform. And that's what's going to happen here is a reset. Folks will get a chance to look at the new candidate, if it's Vice President Harris or whoever it is. And that person's going to have to make a very, very good first impression. Because if they make a bad first impression, this race could well be over. So people are going to be watching. It's going to make the race very different and fundamentally change it. But we don't know in what direction.
Governor Christie, thank you. I want to bring in now Senator Heidi Heitkamp. Senator Heitkamp, we were talking earlier just about how unprecedented this all is, dealing with these fast-moving developments as well for your party. Some of the challenges going forward, and let me ask you just a follow-up to what I was just talking about Governor Christie about with. When we talk about the debate that just happened just a matter of weeks ago, that really set off the sort of chain reaction with Democrats calling on the president to step aside. There is one more debate, and Vice President Kamala Harris does commit to that should she be the Democratic nominee or whoever is in that position. That could come at a very pivotal point in this race, too.
Yeah, absolutely. But she's a good debater, and she is a very, very sharp, intelligent woman. But, you know, when you look at moving forward, and what Chris was just saying is you don't win any points by trying to stop someone from getting ballot access. I don't care what the Heritage Society said. I saw polling when Maine and Colorado and Minnesota tried to keep President Trump from being on the ballot, former President Trump. And the independents and undecideds reacted very negatively to that. Plus, why would you turn your attention right now on Joe Biden? The competition is going to be someone else. The other point that I want to make, Rachel, is, and you'll hear more about this as time goes on, the FEC has rules. This money that the Biden campaign has raised was raised for this ticket. If Kamala Harris is not the nominee or on this ticket, that will change the dynamics of how the money can and should be spent. And so that's going to be another factor in the determination that the Democrats will have to make on who their candidate is.
A follow-up for you there. Explain that a little bit more. So this could have an impact even on how the money is spent going forward in this campaign for whoever the Democratic nominee is.
Yeah, the FEC has rules. If you raise money for a candidate and then the candidate is no longer the candidate, in this case, they raise money for a ticket, then something has to happen with that money, and it doesn't automatically.
The U.S. is a lost cause for revolution, in my opinion. Third worldism, baby. Yeah, I mean... it's the core of the imperial core, so it is the last place on Earth, pretty much, that would have a revolution, or one of the last. It has such a long anti-communist history, so much brainwashing, that it's definitely not gonna happen anytime soon. So yeah, I think just like, yeah, it's not like, I'm not like expecting anything to happen anytime soon. And my mouse is gone again.
Translate to the next person who might be nominated. It would have to go to state parties, as I understand it. It could be spent other ways. But remember this, rates have been locked in for this candidate. By that I mean ad rates. And so all of that gets upset if Kamala Harris is not the nominee. And so
all
these
of
are
the money
things
they've spent on ads and stuff, they're going to have to start
in terms of making this
they're going to have to start making ads for Kamala instead. All that money down the drain.
Not just the DNC rules, the rules of the FEC, also the Democratic Party as a whole, whether or not they're going to rally behind Vice President Kamala Harris as President Biden is endorsing him. There's so much to digest here on this very extraordinary day in American politics, a moment, a historic moment in this nation. I want to turn now to our executive editorial producer, John Santucci. John, for months now, you have had this rematch between President Biden and former President Donald Trump. All that now changing. How is the Trump campaign responding to this?
So the Trump campaign, we've already seen those initial statements, Rachel, of course, Donald Trump attacking Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. We know from our sources that the Trump team has been building a book to take on Kamala Harris, attack her for some of her past statements, and do everything they can to tie her to Joe Biden. Now, look, the Trump team is going to have to very quickly, Rachel, take the money and pivot to attack Kamala Harris. I can tell you from my sources, MAGA Inc., that's Make America Great Again Inc., that is a super PAC aligned with Donald Trump. They've already taken, Rachel, a $5 million ad buy for
Try to tell one of my lefty American friends that most of the stuff you hear about the USSR is propaganda, and she started getting real weird. I mean, dude, or I don't know your gender, but just send my videos, I think, or send another left tuber's videos on the Soviet Union. The videos I make are very well researched and backed up by data, or you can send the Young Hegelian's videos on that stuff. His videos are also very good. Or you can do my friend Balkan Odyssey's videos. His videos are also very good. There's plenty of resources you can send instead of wasting your time trying to debate people.
Preparing for the possibility that it could be Vice President Kamala Harris that former President Donald Trump faces off against in November. I want to bring now in our ABC White House correspondent, Mary Alice Parks. Mary Alice, you have been keeping your ear to the ground, talking to sources within the Democratic Party, but also hearing from delegates who have a lot of questions about how this plays out going forward.
Yeah, Rachel, I just got off the phone with one Democratic State Party chair who told me that he was not given a heads up to this news, which is obviously a big deal considering the fact everything we've been talking about for the last hour. But interesting, he did say that he was given a call from the Biden universe the minute after the news broke. The Biden team wanting to make sure that he was aware of the news, but also that he was checking in with the delegates from his state. Obviously, the conversation, the mechanics of this nomination turned to those delegates like we've been talking about. This state party chair said that in the conversation he's been having with his delegates from his state, I should say.
I was going to tell her about my videos, but the conversation got very awkward. I thought it was a friendly convo, but she took it weirdly personally. Maybe she has a friend's, uncle's, nephew's, grandmother's, daughter's, sister's uncle who said that he was persecuted in the Soviet Union or something. Oops.
With such a different political landscape, Rachel.
Yeah, Mary Allison, I know you personally will be tracking that for us as well. I want to go back to our chief Washington correspondent, Jonathan Karl. Jonathan, I've been thinking about some of the conversations that I was having on Capitol Hill with many senators, and there were some senators who didn't want to come out publicly and call on the president to step aside until there was sort of this plan in place on who potentially would step up and become the Democratic nominee. We've been following these movements in real time. This breaking news, the president announcing he's going to step aside. Then we saw that post on social media, the president then endorsing Vice President Kamala Harris. And then it was sort of this silence from some of these statements where they were commending President Biden, but not necessarily jumping to the defense or endorsing Vice President Kamala Harris for the job. Has that changed in the span of the last few minutes?
It's starting to change, Rachel. We're starting to see statements from some key senators that are not...
I'll have to check out those USSR videos. It's so hard to get good info on history. Yeah, I'll post a couple of mine in the chat. that one's a good starting video. And then this one's also one of my best on the Soviet Union, I think. And what else? This one's also mainly about the Soviet Union. Those are probably my three most broad but effective videos about the Soviet Union, I'd say. Anyone who watches those three videos and like isn't at all convinced or like swayed in any way is just an absolute worthless human being that is not worth speaking with. Like, they just have no interest or care in anything remotely pertaining to reality or facts or anything. Anyways.
The decision is ultimately up to the DNC delegates, which is just a fact. But all three of those very key senators saying it's Kamala Harris. And I'll add a fourth, since you asked, Elizabeth Warren, of course, who ran herself against Joe Biden in 2020, saying that Vice President Harris is the person who was chosen by the voters to succeed Joe Biden if needed. She can unite our party, take on Donald Trump, and win in November. So there, you know, it's you still have some notable individuals, leaders in the party, potential national figures who have not endorsed Kamala Harris or even mentioned her in their statements. But now you are starting to see a bit of a coalescing around the idea that Kamala Harris should be the one on top of the ticket now that Biden is out.
John, you were the very first one to report and break the news that Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer had urged President Biden to step aside. How critical will it be for these Democrats to hear from party leaders, as serious voices in this party, like the Clintons, like Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, Hakeem Jeffries, Jim Clyburn, even Nancy Pelosi?
Well, I think it's incredibly important. These are the leaders of the party, and I believe what you will see from them is an idea that this process, which is obviously has to be expedited, needs to be orderly. There still is a view among some of those leaders you just mentioned that.
Yes, Lena, I agree with what you said. Much of what gets dismissed as tanky is fine, but MAGA communism and Nazis do exist. But the thing is that people like Vosh and all of his sycophants, I don't know, Vosh has done a weird like left-wing turn lately, but what they do is they combine it all into one thing. And it's tired at this point. I already responded to all of that in the video I did a long time ago.
Those were Biden delegates. It was Joe Biden that ran in the primaries. It was Joe Biden that got 14 million votes in the Democratic primary. Now, the point that Elizabeth Warren mentioned in her statement is Kamala Harris obviously was chosen by the delegates in 2020, and she won and was elected.
I mean, I'd rather live in modern China today than USSR in the 1940s, since 27 million people died in the USSR in the 1940s. I mean, actually more than that. That was just from the war alone. There was a famine after the war as well.
Just talking to John about the importance of Democratic leaders weighing in. You reported just moments ago about the Clintons weighing in. Now you're getting word from the Obamas as well.
We are, Rachel, and this is a very lengthy statement from the office of Barack and Michelle Obama. I'm going to bear with me as I read through this in real time here. He praises his former vice president, saying Joe Biden has been one of America's most consequential presidents, as well as a dear friend and partner to me. Today, we've been reminded again that he's a patriot of the highest order. That lines up, of course, with so much of the praise that we have heard for Joe Biden and so much of the pressure that was put on him to step aside for the good of the country. The Obamas go on to mention that what they admire most about Joe Biden is his deep empathy and hard-earned resilience, his fundamental decency and belief that everyone counts. They tick through some of his many accomplishments while Biden has been in office during his first term. And they say more than that, President Biden pointed us away from the 4 years of chaos, falsehood, and division that had characterized Donald Trump's administration. Through his policies and his example, Joe has reminded us of who we are at our best, a country committed to old-fashioned values like trust and honesty, kindness and hard work, a country that believes in democracy, rule of law, and accountability. They praise his track record and everything that he has fought for throughout his life. He also says that he knows Joe Biden has never backed down from a fight, and for him to look at the political landscape and
yeah, whatever. So, again, if anyone wants to support me, you know, still working on the grind, still working on releasing videos, all that stuff, please do. But I'm gonna head out and touch grass, as they say. I hope people enjoyed. I hope that clearly I'm way too tired to stay on the stream any longer. But yeah, I hope people enjoyed. I hope they learned something. Probably not. But yeah, I'll probably just keep doing streams like this when like some crazy event happens. Because I would have been following this anyways offline, so I might as well stream it instead. So yeah, but anyways, that's about all. Take it easy, everybody.